What's up, friends? Happy Friday. Welcome into this Q&A happy hour session of the Pack a Day podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Really appreciate you guys being here. I know it's been a long, crazy week in the world, as it usually is. And what I figured, we could do today is just talk some Packers, make it nice and airy and easy going, and hopefully just kick off the weekend the right way. If you're drinking, hit me up in the chat with what you're drinking. I've got a very nice Mountain Dew Kickstart, not sponsored. We're going grape today because I have the flavor profile of a 5-year-old child, which is well documented, but I needed the energy more than the alcohol today. So I'm going Mountain Dew Kickstart. So cheers to anyone who's joining for a beverage. All right. Obviously, per usual, any super chats or anything like that will go to the top of the list, but I'll try to get to as many questions as I can, probably around 45 minutes today. We got a Powerade Zero fruit punch. Enjoy your Powerade Zero, Kevin. That sounds amazing. Always love a good fruit punch flavored drink or fruit candy, etc. I had a Coke and now I'm ready to talk some Packers. I'm right there with you. I just finished up that as well. I'm a big Coke Zero guy, just filling my body with a bunch of really great stuff, I'm sure. All right, Joseph. I'm just going to comment on this really quick. I'm not sure if I think he would probably very much take a coaching job in Green Bay if given the opportunity. Can't speak for him for sure. But my bigger comment here is that Mike hits it out of the park every single week. I learn something from him every time we talk. He's so smart, so articulate, doesn't have nearly the followership on Twitter that he should. He's criminally under followed and all of that stuff. He's just the absolute best. You don't get very many former players who also can talk about the game, both from a extremely high level, but also at a very common level. You don't have to have a PhD in football to understand it. He hits both of those things. And then just so freaking smart and analytical with everything that goes through his mind. So process driven. He's the absolute best. I wish he did have some job as a on the Packers staff in some capacity. Super, super smart dude. And so excited that we get to talk to him every single week. I asked him the question if he would take the what did I say, the Bears job if they offered it to him, and he said he would. So I'm sure he would take a Packers job as well. All right, Kevin, from your video with Walt today, do you think the personnel would better fit for a 4-3 scheme if Joe Barry's like, oh, Quay would do damage as a 4-3 outside linebacker or weak side linebacker? Here's the thing. It doesn't matter anymore. What are you playing base defense? 10% of the snaps, maybe? And even when there's opportunities for Green Bay to play base defense, they're in nickel or sometimes even dime. It's 4-3 versus 3-4. It doesn't matter anymore in the modern NFL. Your base defense in the modern NFL is a nickel defense. And then your obvious pass defense is either a pass rush specialist nickel defense or a pass rush specialist dime defense. And then you can mix and match players where you want to play them. But 4-3 versus 3-4 is irrelevant in the modern NFL. Now, the only place where it is sort of relevant, in my opinion, is do you want your players on the outside standing up or hand in the ground? Do you want your edge players to be, again, hand in the dirt, ready to rush the passer? Or do you want them standing up with the ability to drop back into coverage? I'm always a huge believer that I think the more you can do and the more just the better disguised you can be, the better. And I think standing up is just the better way to go because you have the ability to drop back into coverage. And I know people get upset with why is Preston Smith dropping back into coverage? A lot of times you are if you bring a different player, you got to drop somebody back into coverage. Or even if you are playing base defense and you're in a 3-4, you've got your 3 down linemen, your 2 edge rushers, your 2 outside linebackers standing up. If you want to bring 4, which is the common amount of players to bring, you got to drop one of those guys. So it's just going to happen naturally. But I enjoy the standing up and the ability to drop back into coverage more than just a traditional hand in the dirt guy. So I don't necessarily think 4-3 versus 3-4 matters in the modern NFL. And quite frankly, if you wanted to if you're a 3-4 team and you wanted to play a down into 4-3, you easily could. It's not like all of these guys know how to play a base 4-3 defense. You could put out there a line that has Rashawn Gary as a defensive end, Kenny Clark and TJ Slayton with Devontae Wyatt on the other side, with Quay Walker as your weak side linebacker, Devondre Campbell is your inside linebacker. You'd probably need to figure out something. You could probably even use just like Kingsley Enagbare as your strong side linebacker, something like that, and run a 4-3 on any given down. Again, it's not like anything you're going to run a ton of. So yeah, that's where I kind of stand on it. All right. Oh, there we go. See, Nagler and I got to plan this out better every single week. We have not discussed it. We have not talked about it. I mean, the nice thing is they're always recorded. And if you want to check out Nagler first and then come check out this later, or vice versa, be my guest. Aaron's awesome. And we definitely probably should talk it out a little bit more, but we have not had the opportunity to do so. All right. Lee Bruce, first, second, and third round picks next season. Where do you go? I'm saying tackle, first round, running back, and safety. So there's obviously a variety of different ways to look at this, Lee. You hit the three positions that are going to be the biggest needs. We'll put it that way. Offensive line clearly is going to need some upgrades. More importantly, you don't know what's going to happen with Bakhtiari. Josh Myers is not shown to be a long-term answer. Jon Runyan Jr. is having a very disappointing season and is an unrestricted free agent, while Yosh Nijman they have no faith or trust in at the moment and is an unrestricted free agent. You're going to have a lot of holes. Right now, the only players that you can pencil in as starters on the offensive line next year, in my opinion, is Zach Tom and Elgton Jenkins. That's it. Everything else is up for grabs, or at least in a perfect world should be up for grabs. And even there, you have your two players left. And the nice part is you have your two players left that you can probably fill in anywhere that you need. So yes, offensive line probably is 1B on the list, and then safety and running back right after that. So what's 1A on the list? Green Bay is not in any sort of position whatsoever to be like, well, there's this awesome defensive tackle on the board, but we really need a offensive tackle, so we'll take the offensive tackle. Or there's a generational corner or safety or wide receiver or tight end or whatever it may be on the board, but we got to take an offensive lineman. Right now, it's cliche, it's boring, it's lame, it's not sexy. They need the best player available. They need talent on this roster, and I don't care what position it is. Find the best, most talented players. They need a home run hit in the first round next year, period. It can't be another, well, let's take somebody with a great athletic profile and some upside, and maybe in 2028 they'll be no. They need to find a really good player who can come in and play at a very high level right away, assuming that this season plays out and they have a top 20, 15, 10, 5, who knows at this point, pick in the draft. They're going to need to find somebody who can come in and be a big-time playmaker. They desperately need that big-time player. So I don't really care what position it is, specifically in the first round. Go out and get that ultimate player that can help you right away and really be an impact player from day one. Brett, not great. Not great, Brett. The offensive line has not performed well without Bakhtiari. I'm sure probably people are sick of me saying this by now. I've said it on a couple of radio shows this week, and I'm sure I've said it on here as well. To me, offensive line is like a starting rotation in baseball, which we're not going to talk about the Brewers because that news today is also super depressing. But if you lose your ace, you're going to be in big trouble, because all of a sudden now your number 2 has to be your 1, your 3 has to be your 2. We've got some bullpen or reliever that's trying to pitch on the 5th day, and everything just feels worse. For Green Bay, they lost their ace. They lost their number 1 guy. And now their number 2 guy also has been out for 2 weeks, but now Elgton Jenkins has to be the 1. Zach Tom has to be the 2. And now you've got to fill in some of those other spots with Rasheed Walkers or Yosh Nijmans, and your more platooning players are just trying to figure something out that's going to work. I think there's been a variety of things at play. 1 is Bakhtiari's injury. 2 is the other guys have been banged up too. Elgton Jenkins has been out. Jon Runyan Jr. and Zach Tom have both been banged up. You can tell they haven't been, either of them, at 100%. So you've got your number 1 guy out, your number 2 guy who has missed a couple games, number 3 and 4 who are playing hurt, and then your number 5 guy just hasn't been all that good in Josh Myers. And then the next guys up have been a little bit disappointing as well, whether it be Royce Newman or Rasheed Walker. And just the fact that Ryan and Nijman can't even get in the rotation isn't a great sign either. So quite frankly, they just haven't played very well. Part of that is also going up against Aiden Hutchinson. Part of that's going up against Max Crosby. They faced 2 very, very good pass rushers. That I could understand a little bit more, but it's more of like the John Kaminsky's and the Malcolm Kuntz's of the world that are beating Green Bay's offensive line. That gives you more cause for concern. And the whole fact that they can't run block to save their lives. That also a huge problem. So that's where Green Bay's line is at right now. It needs some help. It needs some work. And that's as as Lee mentioned earlier, offensive line definitely going to be a huge priority for them moving forward. Everything, Adam. The Packers should be focusing on everything. This is also lame and cliche and not sexy and not fun, but it's fundamentals. This team has to basically narrow things down, get back to the basics, and start trying to figure out the basics and do those well, and then expand out. Like, you can't have your top 20 plays that you're called, that you're game planning for, that you're practicing, go to complete crap. Like, and you just can't have it where the stuff that's scripted, the stuff that you know ahead of time you're going to run, the offense can't run successfully. They haven't had, figured out what they do well running the football. They haven't found out what they do well passing the football. Their screen game's not working. Their deep game's not working. On the defensive side of the ball, I thought this past week they rallied pretty well. They tackled pretty well. I thought they filled their gaps pretty well. So there were some signs on defense that some of that stuff is coming along a little bit better, but you see those gaps, those hiccups from time to time. To me, it's just the basics. Get back to the basics. This is, if it wasn't abundantly clear, before the start of the season, this is not a Super Bowl contending team. Your goal should be to mold and take the players on this roster and make them into big time starting players by 2024 and 2025, specifically 2025. That should be your date marked on the calendar of 2025. We need to have a ultra competitive team. You should be financially much more better off financially by that point. You should have a lot of early draft capital that is now starting to come into their own, playing together. But what that means for this year is, don't try to sugarcoat stuff and be like, well, we can't really do this well, so let's run some reverses or some flea flickers, or pitch the ball to Emmanuel Wilson, who will throw back to Jordan Love, who will throw to Dontavian. No, this is the time to get the basics right, to make sure that all of these players have like a base understanding of how to block and how to adjust their pad level and how to run plays and how to be successful in the NFL. Mike McCarthy got kind of roasted from time to time when anytime they would lose, he'd be like, all right, well, we got to go back to the fundamentals. But more often than not, he was right. Football is always going to have different flavors and different flash plays and sexy stuff that comes in and out of your playbook and new and exciting things. But at its core concept, it's a violent sport that is predicated on smash mouth football that can block and blow up the person ahead of you, and tackle and play physical, violent football on the other side. And now, once you can do that, once you set that intensity, set that tone, as we're seeing right now in San Francisco and in Philadelphia and the best of the best teams, now that all of a sudden you've got that going for you, now you can run some more fun stuff. Now you can open up and expand the playbook because you've got your basics down. But what I want to see from this team is a much better just core concept, basics, leverage, fundamentals, all of those sort of things. Master that first. Make sure that those guys have football 101 mastered, and then get into all the other stuff. And right now, football 101 is not coming very simple and easy for this team. Justin, of the AC wings at AC Tap as good as AJ Dillon says? They absolutely are. It's interesting. I've been a Door County guy my entire life. I mean, I've spent weeks and weeks in Door County since I was 7 years old. I've been to every corner of the entire county. For some reason, I had never been to AC Tap. I think I've probably been to every other establishment in Door County. For some reason, I had never been to AC Tap until AJ Dillon had talked about it. So, of course, I had to check it out and finally got there. I've been there a couple of times now. And yes, the wings have been fantastic. So definitely recommend them. And thanks so much for the chat, Justin. All right. What else we got here? Kevin, we are a little too early for that quite yet. And I'm not saying like they need to make that decision or like that like they shouldn't go in that direction. I totally get what you're saying. We just need to see like what coaches get fired, who's available from the college ranks and the NFL ranks and all those sort of things. Those are the things that we'll look at more as time goes on. I'm not even close to knowing right now what potential, I know a lot of people will say Jim Leonard. I'm not quite there yet. Like, we'll see. We'll get to that point eventually, I'm sure. All right, Vex, if the Packers are a draft and develop organization, wouldn't hiring a coach who develops players have been smarter than a scheme coach like Matt LaFleur? It's a very complex question with a very complex answer. You have to remember that when Matt LaFleur was hired, you're trying to maximize Aaron Rodgers' prime at that point, or like the remainder of his prime at that point. And remember, like Mark Murphy made no bones about it. Like the goal of hiring a new head coach was to get Aaron Rodgers playing back at an MVP level and get that offense back on track. And there was very clear writing on the wall in the NFL of like this Kyle Shanahan offense was taking over, even with some less than stellar quarterbacks. So the thought process was, if you get somebody with that mindset and that scheme and that mentality to now pair with Aaron Rodgers, imagine what that group can do. And that's what they did. They went 13-3, 13-3, 13-4, NFC Championship, divisional round. And clearly the playoffs did not go according to plan, and a lot of that was defense and special teams, but they got what they asked for that team and what they needed in that moment. Now, to your larger point right now, it is, I think, a bit of an issue. And I do think the mixture of Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst and the overarching Packers philosophy with what Matt LaFleur wants to be as a head coach is a little bit disjointed and off right now. I do think that the Packers still want to be a draft and develop franchise. And especially right now with all the first round picks that they've had and moving on from Rodgers and moving on from Adams, this is a franchise that has put a ton of resources into younger players. And I do think Matt is a little bit more of a scheme oriented, what can we scheme up this week, matchup oriented head coach. I'm not saying he doesn't know X's and O's. I'm not saying he can't develop players, but I think that the other side of it is what he excels at more. And it's not just Matt too. This is a league that's generally gone in that direction. It's really hard to develop players in the modern NFL with just the constraints due to the CBA and how much practice time and padded practices and all those things. So it's very difficult, but that's an overarching thing that this organization needs to come to the conclusion of do you want to continue to be draft and develop? And I did a whole episode, you can search it on YouTube, of like draft and develop is kind of dead. There's just not enough time to quote unquote develop young players anymore. The teams that are having success right now are far more often the teams that are drafting the players that are ready to come in and play right away, and now using those players and still getting them to grow as they go on. But the trying to take the raw ball of clays and developing them, it's getting tougher and tougher. So that's something that I think this organization needs to look at as a whole and figure out what they want to be, because I don't think it's necessarily quite on the same page between what Goody and Matt are necessarily best at. All right, Captain Quint, thanks so much for this. I really appreciate it. What's my level of confidence that Jordan Love is the future of this team? I don't have a great, I'll say like 50-50 right now, Captain, because I don't know. I don't have a great feel for it right now. I do think he is one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. I think he's a starting quarterback, but there's a huge width and breadth there of what that means. If you're a top 5 quarterback, you have a puncher's chance at a Super Bowl every single year. If you have a top 10 quarterback with the right roster, you've got a real legitimate chance at a Super Bowl every single year. If you're a top 15 quarterback with the right situation and the really right circumstances, you've got a chance at a Super Bowl. If you're 16 to 23-ish, you're in an okay range, but you know that you're kind of always going to be looking for an upgrade. And the quarterback that you have at that moment might be an okay/safe bet, but you're still always keeping your eye out of like, we're going to take a quarterback at least in the 3rd or 4th or 5th round every year just to see if maybe lightning strikes and we find a Tom Brady or maybe even a Brock Purdy at this point. Who knows? But maybe we get lucky and find somebody better. You're always kind of keeping your eye open. And if you're 25 to 32, you're constantly looking for the upgrade. You're looking every single year until you find that better quarterback. And I don't know at the end of Jordan Love's, in the next couple seasons, we'll just put it that way, what bucket of that he falls into. I think right now he's probably closer to the bottom of those 32. He's still a starting caliber quarterback, in my opinion, but one where at minimum you're keeping your eye out. Now, I'm not saying they should be looking right now. I'm not saying that they in next year's draft immediately need to look for his replacement. I'm not saying that at all. I think the rest of the season will tell a little bit more of what sort of direction they need to go in. But I'm just saying right now, we don't know what range he's going to end up in as a starting quarterback. My guess is the ceiling is probably somewhere, lower than the top 10, just off the top of my head. My guess is the floor is probably somewhere around like 28, but where he falls between 10 and 28 is really, really difficult to say at this point. So I'm on the fence at the moment. I thought earlier in this year it was trending more in the right direction. Right now it seems to be trending more in the wrong direction. I think the biggest thing that I would say is trying to come to any conclusion on that after 5 games would be foolhardy at best. Even after like a full season this year, you still have to really parse out, all right, what can we correct and what's uncorrectable and what just is what it is. And right now it's best to stay even keeled with it and take some of the really high highs with a grain of salt and take some of the really low lows with a grain of salt. I think even more importantly is this is an offense that has done Jordan Love very few favors, and they cannot run the ball at all. They've had a lot of injuries. You're looking at, I mean, if Aaron was still the quarterback of this team, everyone would be saying, oh my God, all they gave him was first and second year wide receivers and tight ends. Is like, he doesn't have a veteran on this entire team. And like everyone would be talking about it. This is a young quarterback, a first time starting quarterback who has wide receivers and tight ends and running backs. There's like 4 or 5 instances in this past game where they're in the same spot, not where they probably should be. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot going on. The offensive line has not protected well these past couple games. So when you're a young quarterback and you're just starting to get your bearings and feel for the speed of an NFL game, and now your line's not protecting as well, receivers are all over the place and not necessarily always in the right spot, and like just everything's flying at you fast. You can't run the ball. They're not biting on your play action at all because you can't run the ball. He's not being put in a position to succeed overall. And I think that makes the evaluation pretty difficult at the moment. And that's why I'd say like right now it's 50-50 either way. I think it's going to take a good chunk of the rest of the season. And hopefully when Jones comes back, they start developing the run more. The run's working. The play action works. The play action works. The deep ball works better. The deep ball works better. The intermediate stuff opens up more and everything starts getting a little bit better just step by step. That's what we want to see the remainder of the season. Hey, thanks so much again, Captain Quint. You're the best. Going back in time, which player do you resign? Hyde, Hayward, or Lindsey? Lindsley, I'm assuming you mean. All right, so what this is going to amount to is which player would have helped most in 2020 and or in 2021. Probably, or in 2019, I guess, but probably 2020, since that's NFC Championship game at home. Hyde would have helped. Hayward would have helped. You probably don't have Kevin King in there at the end of that game. And did they have Lindsley in 2020? I'm trying to remember if they had Lindsley in 2020. I feel like they almost did. I don't want to look. But I'd probably go one of the defensive backs. If I'm choosing between those 3, I think Casey Hayward had a really good year that year. But either Hayward or Hyde for that 2020 team to hopefully contain maybe Brady a little bit better. Because I think so 2020 offense. Yeah, they still have Lindsley in 2020. So I'll take Hayward or Hyde and you can make your pick. But I think Casey Hayward had a pretty good year that year. So maybe I'll go in that direction. Good question though. Captain Quint, you are the man, my friend. Who's a content creator you most want to collaborate with, but haven't yet? JT O'Sullivan right now. That dude is freaking killing it. I mean, just unbelievable. And the only reason that I wouldn't want to do it is because I don't want him taking his time away to do anything with anyone else. Just keep doing what you're doing, my friend. That dude is awesome. And what I love about JT O'Sullivan is he will tell you what he thinks he knows. He will tell you what he doesn't know. He will tell you what he does know. And then he will show it all to you in a very well-rounded and articulate way. It is so well done. There are certain people that you watch and you aspire to be more like, and you can gain things from. Let me put it this way. I don't know if many people know this. From a Packers standpoint, there are extremely few people that I read or watch or do anything with. I want my Packers opinions and thoughts to be my own, and I don't want to regurgitate other things. Now, obviously, when I collaborate with somebody, I'm listening to them and talking to them when I have all the great guests on that we have, but I don't go out of my way to watch or read other stuff far more often than not, because I want my mind to be cleared of all the other outside stuff. And when I'm watching the film and going through every single player on every single play each week, I want it to be my own organic thoughts. And I don't want to cloud that. JT O'Sullivan is a huge exception for me, where every single Jordan Love video that comes out, I am like, I cannot wait to go out and watch what he's doing. It is so freaking good. And yeah, that'd be the answer. And yeah, QB School, awesome content. Yes, I have collaborated with Grassi in the past. He's been on here. I can't remember if I've been on his or not. I know we've collaborated in a couple different ways, but yeah, he's always great to talk to. He's come on some, he was on, I think, the week 1 live, Pack-A-Day Live last year. Him and Wes Hodkiewicz were on. That was a really fun episode to do with those two guys. We've done just a normal podcast episode as well. So yeah, Grassi's great to work with. Always love chatting with that guy. We've got the opportunity to meet a couple different times. Super nice guy. What you see on his videos is who he is in person, and that makes it that much cooler. And yeah, Mike, as we talked about earlier, Mike does an absolutely incredible job. I've watched Kurt from time to time. I don't go out of my way to watch Kurt like I do QB School, but Kurt does a really great job as well. I like Orlovsky as well. I think he does a good job. He can get a little bit ESPN-y and sort of hot takey at times, but when he's just on the board and just drawing things out, awesome stuff on Orlovsky. I would love, Ben and I have like worked on some stuff in the past where we tried to do weekly and it just didn't work for Ben. In season's really tough for Ben because he's doing Thursday night football and Sunday football. But I'm going to try to, continue to get Ben on as much as I can, hopefully once a month. Obviously during draft season, we have Ben on quite a bit as well, because he's such an amazing analyst breaking down the draft. So yeah, we'll try to continue to get Ben on as much as we can possibly get him on. Another person that I love talking to. That was another person when he did his articles for The Athletic. Those were must read as well. And just, you learn something every single time. Dusty Evely, another great person. The episodes with John Kuhn right now on She Said TV. And just anytime you have the opportunity to listen to Dusty Evely, you will become smarter as a person. I love those sort of film breakdowns. Dusty Evely, Ben does a great job with it as well. Again, we talked about JT O'Sullivan. There's some really good stuff out there. Mar, great to see you in the chat, buddy. Always love seeing you on Twitter. Love interacting with you. You're the best. Thanks so much for being here. David, come on now, my friend. It's a great question, but you know that as soon as the season ends, for like 9 months up until the season starts again, or at least until training camp and all that starts again, I've got content for you every single day. 2 weeks is nothing. 2 weeks is not. I haven't even got to my grades from Monday. I finally finished up my grades today. Article and podcast will be up tomorrow for my grades, and then we'll talk a bunch of stuff. I've got some great things set up for next week that I want to talk about and go over. So never an issue. I think one of the fun things and what I reference all the time is, as a fan of the Packers, it's really easy because all I have to do is think about like, oh, what would I want to know? Well, or what do I know? What do I want to know about this team? What hasn't been discussed yet? And it's really fun and easy to kind of come up with content ideas when you have that kind of mindset from it. So 2 weeks is nothing, my friend. And by the way, we're almost through this week. And like I said, I haven't even had the chance to do grades yet. And then before you know it, we'll be talking Packers Broncos by like Wednesday of next week. So just a handful of days that you need kind of a couple different topics mixed in there, but should not be a problem at all. Holy crap, Vex, my man, you are the best. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything else to say. Next, I know you always come in and ask questions. So you were the best. I see you in here a ton. I went into Nagler's chat last week as well. I saw you in there as well. So I appreciate you supporting a lot of the great Packers content that's out there. Super nice of you, Vex. Enjoy your weekend, my friend. All right. What else we got? Yeah, I was doing it. I was working full time. It is so crazy now because I'm so busy right now. Like Peter Bukowski actually said, I talked to some people before making the jump to doing full time. I talked to Grassi actually. I talked to Peter Bukowski. I talked to a couple different people just to get like, is there anything I'm missing? And one of the things that I heard, and Bukowski was the one who said it right away, is like, you will start working full time, or you'll start doing this full time, and you will wonder how in the hell you did it before when you were doing a full-time job as well. I am so far in that spot right now that I have no idea how I worked like a 50-hour job on top of what I was doing. It seems insane now that I'm doing it without the job. But I'm very, very blessed and very, very lucky to be able to get to do this 365 days a year, and nothing in the world that I would rather be doing other than being GM of the Packers, which you guys can be very thankful that I am not. I can promise you that. Rob, I don't know that he's in. Well, I think based on Stanovich's interview that he did and basically kind of threw Yash under the bus a little bit, and then LaFleur came back and walked it back a little bit. He was clearly in the doghouse in some capacity. I'll just say this. From what I saw at training camp, Rasheed Walker was better. From what I saw in preseason, Rasheed Walker was better. So, like, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that Yosh Nijman can't be performing better than what we've seen out of Rasheed Walker these past few weeks. I think there's a good chance that maybe Nijman would have been better than Rasheed Walker these past few weeks. But I can also tell you that I understand, based on what I saw in camp and in preseason, that Walker won that job fair and square. They played very similar amount of snaps, and I thought just Walker was the better offensive lineman during that time. Now, again, it doesn't mean that they couldn't or shouldn't make the change. It doesn't mean that Walker hasn't struggled since he's got into the starting lineup. But the other thing you have to consider too, especially knowing what type of season this is, Yash is a free agent next year, probably not back with the team. Rasheed, only in year 2, and a guy that you want to try to develop and that you'd love to have him be a core member of your offensive line if you can continue to develop him moving forward. That's where I'm at right now. I think that's probably why Rasheed is getting a little bit of the nod, but Rasheed's going to need to play better too, or you are going to hear, or at least start looking for more Yash and just trying something different at this point, because I don't think you can, continue to do what you're doing and expect things to go better. Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere, my friend. I think the Broncos don't have a ton of young talent. He's clearly already shown that he is probably one of the 3. Now, they could call Denver for a running back in general. Like, I think they have Pirine as well, right? Like, they could probably call for Pirine, and he's probably available because they have 3 running backs and they probably only need 2. But yeah, that could be one that they call, but I don't see any deal with Denver coming up, to be totally honest. But McLaughlin looks pretty freaking good so far. All right. So a couple things on this, and thanks for the chat, Vero. Oh, so many places I could start here. All right, let's start with this. When Green Bay was all in, and I mean all in, and trying to do everything they could to win a Super Bowl the past few seasons, how many trade deadline deals did they do? None. So if they weren't looking for a big time trade deadline deal when they were trying to compete for a Super Bowl, they're not going to do one now. At least I'd be very, very surprised and shocked if they did that. Now, the other thing is we should have learned our lesson by now. Will Fuller. Hey, trade for Will Fuller. That would have ended up an unmitigated nightmare. Hey, trade for Chase Claypool. That would have ended up being a unmitigated nightmare. Hey, trade for Emmanuel Sanders. That would have been okay. They would have overpaid. He would have been good for that season, but then he fell off a cliff after that point. So they probably would have overpaid then as well. These trades at the deadline often don't go well for the acquiring teams. I'm not saying it's always the case, but more often than not, that hasn't worked out very well for the acquiring team. The other thing I will say here is this is not a team that's a player away. I don't want to mortgage any future assets. Trading away draft picks right now, like, this is a team that if they go on a losing streak, if Jordan Love were to get hurt or like they suffer a couple big injuries, this could be a team that only wins 1 or 2 more games the remainder of the season. That's potentially a top, 8, 7, 6, 5 pick in every single round. Like, you trade away, like we saw what happened to Chicago last year with Claypool. They traded away. It's just a second round pick. That ended up being the first pick in the second round. Plus Miami got their first round pick nuked. So they ended up trading what was the equivalent of a first round pick for Chase Claypool, who is now no longer on the team. And the other thing too is I don't need Sammy Watkins or some random veteran. I know Sutton is clearly not that. He's a very good wide receiver, but I don't need some random veteran wide receiver sniping snaps from Watson and Dobbs and Wicks and all those guys and Jaden Reed. In fact, I need to see more Dontavian Wicks, not less. So I'm not really looking to see any more wide receivers on this roster because of all the position groups on this team. I actually believe in Wicks, Reed, Dobbs, and Watson, and those guys just need to play more and get more time with Jordan Love. So I have no real interest in a veteran wide receiver, and certainly not trading for one at this point. Hey, Zefroy, Zefroy, either way, thank you so much. Really appreciate you becoming a YouTube member. If you have not checked out YouTube memberships yet, now would be an awesome time to do so. You can sign up by hitting join right below on YouTube, obviously. And there's a lot of different tiers that are available. If you sign up for a Pro Bowl tier or higher, you're going to get a weekly video. Should have this week's video out today, or Saturday or Sunday. It's still coming this week. But you're also getting a weekly Q&A as well. There's a bunch of other perks out there, so make sure to check that out. But Zephyr, thanks so much for becoming a member. All right, who's the best comp to Love in the NFL in your opinion? Well, this is a cop-out, but I think you could look at Sam Howell right now in Washington and make a very similar comparison to the two. Both of them have made some big-time throws. Both of them made some big-time plays. Both of them have won some games already. Both of them showed that they are very mobile and athletic. Both of them have made some very boneheaded and silly mistakes. Both of them have not been the most accurate quarterbacks in the world. Both of them are super young and super talented. Both of them, you could understand why both teams would want to continue to develop them and maybe not just go big game hunting for another big time quarterback and just see what they become over the next couple seasons. So if I'm making the comparison right now, and again, it's a bit of a cop out, I know, because they're basically in the exact same spot, but I would probably say Sam Howell and Jordan Love in the most similar position. I also, by the way, I think PFF has them graded like 0.01 or 0.1 spots from each other as well. So I'd probably go Sam Howell. If you're looking as like an established quarterback, the one that I saw early when Love was playing well is like an upside sort of scenario for Jordan was Dak Prescott, where I think you can see clearly that this is a good starting quarterback and you can win games, and you might even be able to win a lot of regular season games with him. But there's also maybe just something always missing, and you're kind of always wanting for more. And you're always wondering, can it be the guy that gets you to the promised land? That's kind of where I see Jordan potentially ending up as well, where you're like, trust me, a lot of teams right now would love Dak Prescott as their starting quarterback. A lot of teams. But Dallas is also at the point where you're like, all right, can we win it all with Dak? And that could be the spot where you end up with Jordan, where if he hits his upside, you're still thinking of like, man, a lot of teams wish they could have Jordan at quarterback, but you're also wondering if he can ever get you across the finish line. So that's where I think he could potentially end up, in that Dak Prescott territory. But the easy one right now is probably Sam Howell. I think they're in a very similar spot right now. All right, what else we got? Lewis, it's Friday. It is happy hour. All right. Here, I don't know that this is necessarily cap possibilities for Bakhtiari next season, but here are the scenarios for David Bakhtiari next season. The first is that he retires. And if he retires, you're going to get your everything but the signing bonus back, which this is probably the easiest place to start this. The $19 million in signing bonus is already paid. When you think of signing bonus, think of if you go and there's a coffee shop down the road and they're like, hey, come work for us and you get a $500 signing bonus. We'll give you that $500 right now. You come work for us and then you'll start making your salary after that. It's the same in the NFL. You sign that deal. Here's your signing bonus right now. You get that right now. You don't ever have to give it back. That is guaranteed money. It's going to count against the salary cap in different periods of time, but that is money he keeps. So that $19 million is already paid to him, and it is going to count against the salary cap next year, whether he retires, whether he plays, whether he's cut, whether he's traded. It doesn't matter. That $19 million is sunk cost, and he will count against the salary cap $19 million at least next season. Now he's got a little over $21 million on his base salary next year. So that's what we need to focus on. The first one is he retires. The knee doesn't respond. Something else comes up and he realizes, all right, I just got to call it. It's done. It's over. Green Bay saves the $21 million. The $19 million still counts against the salary cap. Again, every scenario it's going to count against that $19 million is going to count against the salary cap. So the $21 million you get back, he's gone, he's retired, it's over, it's done with. That's scenario one. Scenario two is the really, really ugly one. And that's where he is still hurt in some capacity or still injured in some capacity. And now if Green Bay releases him and he, files an injury grievance, there's the theoretical possibility that he could recoup almost, if not all of that money next year. So that 21 million that we're talking about. And then it becomes super messy, and you could end up having released him and you still pay him the full 40 plus million next year. And he's not helping you. And it just gets it's a nightmare scenario, which is why I don't think that would come to fruition. If he's still hurt, you probably just keep him on the roster until he's ready to play and don't risk losing 21 million for nothing on an injury settlement / grievance and not having anything to show for it. That's where it gets really messy. So you're hoping he gets healthy. So either A, he can play for you, or B, you can release him and just save the $21 million. So his health is really important for either of those scenarios, either for playing or for saving money. The third scenario, and I think a decently likely scenario, is that they figure out some sort of restructure that is based entirely upon his playing time next year, where he doesn't make they take the 21 million base salary and they basically make it into, let's say, like a $5 million in $5 million salary. And then he gets an extra million every single week that he plays. So theoretically, he plays all 17 weeks. He makes the 5 million, he makes the 17 million, he makes 22 million, which is even more than he would have got had he stayed on his initial contract. But if all of a sudden he plays only 5 weeks, he gets the 5 million base, 5 million extra, 10 million total, something like that. Some form of restructure where it's more based upon if he actually plays or not. So far we've got retirement. We've got some sort of bizarro, awful injury settlement, grievance, messy land. We've got restructure where he restructures his contract and they figure out some sort of incentive laden contract. Or the other one is he's healthy and they just flat out release him. You save the 21 million. He's free to sign elsewhere and probably gets an incentive laden contract with somewhere else. New York is probably what happens in that situation. That's where that one goes. You could bring up trade. I don't see trade as a realistic possibility. I don't think anyone's trading for him and giving up any sort of realistic salary or compensation. And even if it was, it would be like a conditional 7th. And you would probably just do Bakhtiari a favor and be like, we'll release you, go sign with whatever team you want, rather than getting some conditional 7th round pick back in return. It just wouldn't be worthwhile. So I don't think trade's really an option. And that's why I go with the R's: retirement, release, restructure, or then again, you could end up with that crazy settlement / grievance one where we're hoping that ends up not being the case. That's where we're at with David Bakhtiari. Glad you ruined everyone's Friday with that one. I'm just kidding. All right. Who's the running back room next season? Don't know, Wade. I don't think Dylan will be back. Patrick Taylor, not on the roster yet, which is an interesting sort of turn of events. I would have expected that he was back on the practice squad, but that has not happened yet. So right now we know Emmanuel Wilson is on the roster and he's under contract for next year. Jones is under contract. He's going to be turning 30 sooner rather than later. And then you have to decide, do you want to keep him on or do you want to finally get off that contract, take your medicine, eat the big dead cap hit and move on? Or do you want to keep him on because he's the heart and soul of your team, which they've said and is legitimately true. But that's going to be a difficult decision that they're going to have to make with Aaron. And now we're starting to see, some injury issues with Aaron this year. That's going to be a difficult decision. So Aaron is, I would say, a legitimate coin flip at this time. I don't think Dylan's back. And then he'll start with Wilson, but he'll have to earn his roster spot next year in training camp. If he remains on the active roster this season, assuming that's the case, he'll have to earn it next year. That's what I think where we're at. And then they're going to promise you, mark it down, put it in Sharpie. You can come back to this. You can clip it and show me if I'm wrong. 100% lead pipe lock. They will draft at least one running back in the draft next year, probably in the first 4 rounds, but for sure they will draft at least one running back. Wouldn't be surprised if they even drafted 2. So, all right, Gary. I don't think that is a dick move. I don't know. I don't even know if I want to get into all of this, but let's just put it this way. I hope that it doesn't even get to that point. For everyone's sake, I hope he just gets healthy and then Green Bay has the organic decision to make of, Do we want to move forward with him on the roster, or do we want to go in a different direction? And if he's healthy and Green Bay wants to go in a different direction, I hope Bakhtiari can play somewhere that he wants to play and finish out his career. It's one of my favorite all-time players to watch playing football. And let's just put it that way. I hope it doesn't even remotely get to that point. I hope he's just healthy and everyone can come to an organic conclusion as to what's best for everyone moving forward. I'll put it that way. So Lee, just to clarify here, he would not restructure himself out of any guaranteed money. The 19 million is already paid for and done with. Again, that's already given to him. He's not touching that. It's over. That's done with. The 21 million is completely unguaranteed at the moment. So you could work out a deal with Bakhtiari and the Packers where he restructures and Green Bay says, we'll give you $5 million guaranteed. And then, you can work your way up to incentives based on how many weeks you play off of that. That's just a theoretical, but he's not restructuring himself out of any guaranteed money. All of his guaranteed money he has already received. In fact, he could gain more guaranteed money theoretically by restructuring his contract, and they could meet midway. That could be another option where, Green Bay says, we're not paying you 21 million, we'll pay you 10 million. And Bakhtiari says, well, if I'll take 10 million, but I want it guaranteed instead of 21 million, that's not guaranteed. Like, they could go in a variety of different directions, but he's not negotiating himself out of any guaranteed money. All right. What else we got? Any other big questions here? Richard, this is a really fun one. Have there been any players that have surprised you 5 weeks into the season? I think Rudy Ford deserves a ton of consideration here, and not just consideration, but praise for the way that he has played. He has played a really physical, intense brand of football. He's been pretty darn assignment sure. He's not the most fleet-footed, best angle-taking safety in the history of the world. I think we knew that going in, but he's been in the right spot at the right time far more often than not. Couple big turnover-worthy plays, including the interception this past week. He's more than willing to come up and fill the hole in the running game. He's a physical tackler. He has been a really nice safety. I talked about this earlier this week, but if you've got Nick Collins or Charles Woodson or whatever, a really good safety, you are very happy with Rudy Ford playing next to him at that spot. Now, if Rudy Ford is your one, that becomes a bigger issue, but Rudy Ford's playing really well as a number 2 safety, and he deserves a lot of credit for the way that he's played through 5 weeks. So he would be probably on the top of my list. Any other questions? I probably got to get out of here pretty quick. Mr. Mikey. So yes, we're on the same wavelength, referencing assholes to RAS. So for those who missed it, I don't even know when I talked about it, but yes, I said, what did I say? I don't need relative athletic score. I need relative asshole scores from now on. I want more assholes on this Packers roster. So RAS for me next year in the draft is relative asshole scores. I want some ass kickers on the offensive line. I want some ass kickers on the defensive front. Just some real jerks is what I'm looking for in the front half and the back half of the offense and defense. Just give me some of that. That's what I'm looking for our RAS. Yeah, a bully identity is a great way to put it. And there's no perfect solution. You can't just get, dumb, super aggressive, not thinking like that. That's not what you want either. But you want guys that are going to set the tone. I think that's what everyone's really looking for here. Richard, that's a really fun question. This is a different answer depending on what I'm. Thank you. I'll answer that in a second, Michael. That's a good question. So how do I personally achieve perspective after a loss? This is a different answer depending on what I'm a fan of. Right, with the Packers, it's hard to take off completely my analytical hat at any point anymore. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm not a fan. Doesn't mean that I don't get upset in bad moments. Doesn't mean that I don't get excited in good moments, but it's really tough to completely remove that from who I am at this point and what I cover and all of that. It's very easy for me to take a more long-standing approach with the Packers because of that. And I just think I see the game a little bit differently than I maybe did in the past when I was just full-fledged fan entirely. So losses in general are a little bit easier to get over from a Packers standpoint, and just kind of remove myself from it. With the Bucks or the Brewers, where I can just be a fan and just crack open a beer and just watch the game and not think about it as analytically. Those are ones where you, especially in like big games for like the Brewer playoff games or things like that, those can be a little bit more dejecting. And when the Brewers have such an awesome regular season and then they lose 2 playoff games and they're just done, like those things are tougher to come off of. When the Brewers were in the NLCS against the Dodgers, 4 years ago-ish now, somewhere around there. Maybe it's even longer at this point because time freaking flies. But whatever it was, that I actually got to the point of being like, I don't know that this is fun anymore. I was like almost to like nervous throwing up going into those Dodger Brewer games because they just felt so intense and so important. It was like it might have been and still might have been and still might be the like only opportunity for the Brewers to see like a World Series in my lifetime. I don't know if they're ever going to get to a World Series in my lifetime. And that was such an like awesome opportunity. And so like those games were just like nauseatingly hard to get through to the point where I was like shaking and nauseous going into the game and like wondering, I'm like, is this even fun? I don't even know if this is fun. Like sports are not fun anymore in those situations. It's just, they're just nerve wracking. So it just depends. Some losses are really, really tough. Some are really, really easy. And it just, like I said, it's tough depending on what I'm cheering for, what the situation is, what the scenario is. But overall, I think the best perspective to have is always a long-term perspective. And I think the best perspective to have is always that, as much as it from me, coming from me, who does this 365 days a year and puts more thought, time, effort, and energy into the Packers than probably just about anyone, I think it's still best to have an approach of it's still a sport. It's still for fun. And if you're getting too upset or angry or anything over it, like just to kind of bring yourself back and have that mindset of at the end of the day, it's a game. We do it for entertainment. It shouldn't probably affect our lives as much as it can or should at sometimes. And that's kind of where I try to reshape my perspective if I need to from time to time. All right. So some a-holes of Packers past. Chuck Cecil, that's going way back. He was a great a-hole. Zadarius Smith, I saw somebody post that a little bit. He had that a little bit of that mentality to him. Trying to think who else had that sort of mentality. I think Charles Woodson was not an asshole per se. I don't think at all, but on the field, he had that mentality. Like he didn't care who you were, what you were doing. He just played that style of football. So I don't think like in the traditional sense, like he wasn't somebody that's giving like, asshole vibes off, but he played with that level of confidence and swagger and violence and intensity. So like, that's another player that I would put in that conversation. I'm sure there's 1,000 that I'm missing. Clay Matthews in his prime very much played that way. Like he played very much like it. So there's been a handful. Wayne Simmons is a great one. I'll put a lot of that in that. Rasul Douglas is one that plays. I said this earlier. I said it multiple times this week. If this whole team would have played like Rasul Douglas played, just I'm talking from like a mentality and a clear tape study and just the effort that he's putting into everything. If the whole team played like that every week, this team would be like a 13-4 team, if not better. He's playing an awesome brand of football right now. All right. Couple more. Tari Bigby. What a great player. He would not be afraid to lay someone out. That's for sure. Other questions? Did I get everyone's super chats? I think I did. Anything else? Any other questions, guys, before I get out of here? DJ Lang had a little bit of that in him as well. I don't think Mark Tauscher did. I think Mark Tauscher at his heart was, nice. He's more of a gentle giant than anything, but he played great. No questions about it. Jude Waddy, what a great name. I don't even know if I would consider Jude Waddy an asshole or not, but I love me some Jude Waddy. Anytime anyone wants to post about Jude Waddy, I'll post that up here. All right, we'll end with, I don't want to end with this one because this is going to end in a negative one, but we'll try to probably end with one more after this. Do you think Jair is playing up to his contract? To my untraded eye, he doesn't seem interested in playing the run and is getting beat by some not top flight wide receivers. Well, I can answer this very simply by saying my lowest graded player on defense so far in 2023, just making sure I got this pulled up right, is Jaire Alexander. Negative 1.55 grade. My lowest graded player on defense is Jaire Alexander. Now, the vast majority of that is run defense. So, I'm not saying that he's not a good cover corner. I'm not saying that he's always used the way that he should be. I'm not saying that he's not a good player. He's very clearly a very talented football player. But do I think he's living up to his contract right now? No. I don't think it's particularly close. Do I think Green Bay's lucky to have him on their roster? Yes. Do I think he's going to play much better the rest of the season? I do. Do I think he's going to probably end up being one of the best graded players on the team this season when all is said and done? Yes. But through 5 weeks and including some injuries in there, he's my lowest graded player on defense. And I stand by that. I don't think it's super controversial. I know if PFF does have him graded higher than I do. So if you want to go with that, I'm totally cool with that. There's no perfect grading scale. There's no perfect grading system. There's no perfect grader. But through 5 weeks, I'm not in love with the brand of football that Jaire has played, specifically from a run defense standpoint. The play this week, he gets caught with dead feet in the open field and Jacobs just cuts right by him for 20 plus yards. Those are difficult things to watch. And you can tell he did come up and make one nice tackle in this game. So you'll see it from time to time. But the issue from a grading standpoint and why his grade is probably a little bit lower than what we know he is as a player. Green Bay's playing a lot of zone coverage. And if you're just kind of playing in zone coverage and you're just in your spot and not doing anything, it's tough to get any sort of real positive grades in those situations. And a lot of teams don't throw at Jaire. So if you're just, if on your play, like imagine you're grading the play, right? And Jaire's in cover 3 and all he's doing is just backing up and not doing anything. And the team doesn't throw at him. It's going to be a 0.0 grade on that play, like over and over and over and over again. He's just backing up into his zone, not doing anything. They're not challenging him, and that's it. So it's tough to garner positive grades from a coverage standpoint when that's all that you're doing. And then on the opposite side, in run defense, if you're having some really tough plays in run defense, those are going to grade as negatives. So a lot of times his positives get sort of counterfeit by the fact that they're playing him in zone coverage and he's just getting to his spot and teams aren't challenging him. And that's not going to garner a lot of positive grades. Whereas on the run defense side, it's going to garner some negative grades. So it's all to say, I don't think it's been up to expectation so far. Part of it has been injury. Part of it's been how he's been used. But I would love to see a little bit more from Jaire Alexander. I'll just put it that way. He's a massively, massively, massively talented player. And like I said, Green Bay's lucky to have him on the team. I just want more. And I think everyone should want more from him, is how I would say it. All right. Any last question? Like I said, I want to end on a positive. Okay. This is a fun one, Dan. All right. We'll end with this one. How do I watch the game with a notepad, like taking a test, or sit back with a beer? Well, first of all, if it's a home game, I'm in the press box more often than not. So the Vikings game, I'm going to go with my oldest. That'll be the first time we go to a regular season game together. So a couple weeks, I'm going to go to the home game as a fan in the stands with my oldest son. And then there's one other game. I try to get to one game with my group of friends every year as well. And I think there's a good chance that I go to the game with them this year as well. And then that's more of just as a fan. Otherwise, I'm in the press box, and that is in a very obviously professional atmosphere. And that's more, I'm taking some notes, watching from a very analytical point of view, still kind of watching a little bit as a fan, but obviously you can't, do fan stuff in the press box. So it's more of just, watching it analytically. That's that. When I'm at home, I do still have a notebook, but the road games, I'm watching a little bit more for fun, and I'm still analytically watching it. But whether I'm watching it analytically on the road or at home or whatever it is, the first thing I do once the game is done and once the condensed version is up online is I rewatch the game and rewatch it from an analytical version before I do a podcast or anything like that. So taking notes a lot of times during the game, either mental or actual notes, and then rewatching the game as soon as I get home, and then doing a full analytical breakdown. And then during the week, do the full all 22 review of the game and do it that way. So that is how I do it. And so at the end of the day, I end up watching the game 3 times, live, condensed version, and all 22. And when I'm doing the all 22, most plays, I watch every single play at least 11 times because I'm going and watching it for Preston Smith. And then I'm watching Kenny Clark. And then I'm watching Devontae Wyatt. And then I'm watching Lucas Van Ness. And then I'm Jaire. And then Nixon. And then so on and so forth. So, I'm watching every game quite a bit. And that's how I ultimately watch the game. I missed a super chat. All right. Chances of Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator if the Jets fire him. Well, Aaron Rodgers, you should know better than anyone that you probably have a lot of say as to whether or not Robert Saleh ends up getting fired or not. I think what ultimately happens for the Jets is that they give everyone a pass because Rodgers went out on the third play on offense, whatever, third, fifth, whatever it was. And they're just going to bring everything back next year and try it with Aaron, would be my guess. There could be a world in which they recognize that maybe Aaron coming off a torn Achilles is not the best way to go. And maybe they end up with a top 3 pick in the draft and take their future quarterback and just say, screw it, we're starting over. In that case, yes, then there could be a scenario where Saleh comes to Green Bay as the defensive coordinator. But if I had to guess right now, I would say they do a redo in 2024 with Aaron as the quarterback, Saleh as the coach, Hackett as the coordinator, and see what that team looks like with Aaron at quarterback. That'd be my guess. Doug, cheers. You enjoy your Manhattan. I will continue to enjoy my grape kickstart. And Vex, we will end with you. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Thank you so much for the awesome, super chat today. Super, super kind of you. Thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you for everyone who did the super chats, became new members. This is awesome. I love you guys. This is so much fun to get to do. Honestly, one of my favorite things every Friday is the 4 p.m. happy hour and just talking Packers for an hour and just taking it easy and just kind of winding down from a week that had a variety of podcasts, usually talking to Mike Wall and Carmen Vitale and Justice Mosqueda and Paul Brettel and all the crazy stuff that's going through my mind. And then rewatching the tape, doing the grades, writing articles and doing everything. And then you get to 4 p.m. on Friday, sit back, relax, enjoy the chat. And it wouldn't be as fun without all of you. So thank you so incredibly much. Tomorrow morning, we'll have the Pack a Day podcast grades episode up. So I'll go into my grades this week in a little bit greater detail. Packer Report tomorrow will have the full grades. You can check that out there. I think that's kind of all we got going on over the next couple of days. Sunday will be an all new episode, and look for the members only commercial free video. Not sure what I'm going to talk about quite yet, but I'm sure I'll come up with something, and it should be fun. So check out that as well. See you guys soon. Until next time. And as always, go Pack Go.